under the soft glow of streetlights casting long shadows across the quiet town of Willow Creek. Officer Ben Carson patrolled familiar streets in his cruiser. At 53, Ben was a seasoned officer, having served nearly 30 years, with nights like these, calm and uneventful, blurring into routine. The thrill he once felt had waned, replaced by a sense of weariness. His salt and pepper hair and the deep lines around his eyes hinted at his years of service both as a former Marine and as a dedicated officer. Yet recently, his eyes lacked their old spark. The purpose that once drove him had dimmed, and he was simply counting down to retirement. As he turned onto Willow Lane, a road lined with trees on the town's outskirts, his thoughts drifted to the quiet solitude waiting at home. 5 years had passed since his wife, Laura, had lost her battle with cancer, and their only child, Ethan, was across the country with his own family. The silence of his empty apartment had made these night shifts a welcome distraction from his loneliness. A sudden movement caught Ben's attention, snapping him back to the present. Something dashed across the road ahead of his cruiser. He eased off the gas, squinting into the darkness. Caught in his headlights was a dog, medium-sized, with shaggy, brown fur and perked ears. But it wasn't the dog's appearance that struck him. It was its behavior. The dog seemed frantic, darting back and forth and barking with urgency. Ben pulled over and stepped out, his hand instinctively resting on his holstered gun. "Hey there, Jex," he said gently, approaching the dog with care. "What's got you so worked up?" As he inched closer, the dog became even more agitated, barking louder and glancing toward the woods. It would dart a few steps toward the trees bordering the road, then back to Ben, as if trying to tell him something. "You want me to follow you, don't you?" Ben murmured, feeling a familiar but long-buried instinct stirring within him. Years ago, he had worked with K9 units and recognized this kind of behavior. The dog wasn't just distressed, it was trying to lead him somewhere. For a moment, he hesitated. Protocol required him to call it in and wait for backup. But there was something in the dog's desperate eyes that pulled him forward. If someone needed help, time was of the essence. Decision made, Ben grabbed his flashlight and reached for his radio. "Dispatch, this is Officer Carson. I'm on Willow Lane following a dog into the woods. Might be nothing, but it feels off. Send backup to my location, just in case." "Copy that, Officer Carson," the dispatcher replied, a note of concern in her voice. "Be careful out there." Taking a steadying breath, Ben looked down at the dog. "All right, boy, let's see what's so urgent." As if it understood perfectly, the dog dashed into the woods, pausing every few yards to glance back, ensuring Ben was following. The flashlight in Ben's hand cut through the dark, revealing a narrow, overgrown trail that twisted deeper into the trees. As they ventured further from the road, Ben's senses sharpened, alert to every snapping twig and rustling leaf. The dog moved with a clear sense of purpose, its nose to the ground, leading Ben farther into the woods than he'd ever dared go alone. What felt like an eternity, though probably only 15 minutes, brought a faint light through the trees. As they drew nearer, Ben could make out a rundown cabin, small and neglected, with grimy windows casting a dim glow. The murmur of muffled voices drifted through the stillness of the night, and Ben's heart pounded. This cabin wasn't on any map he knew of, and its secluded location suggested that whatever was happening here was far from innocent. Suddenly, the dog came to an abrupt halt. Its ears flattened, and a low growl rumbled from its throat. Ben knelt down, placing a gentle hand on its back. "Good boy," he murmured. "You've brought me here. Now let me take over." Moving as quietly as possible, Ben approached the cabin, each step calculated. Nearing one of the windows, he could distinguish two male voices, tense and harsh, arguing over something. And then, piercing through their conversation, came a muffled, desperate sob, a woman's. A chill ran down Ben's spine. He was alone, possibly outnumbered, and with no knowledge of how many were inside or what weapons they might have. The safe move would be to retreat and wait for backup. But that sob, a clear cry for help, left him no choice. Someone was in danger, and every second mattered. Ben steadied himself, making a quick decision. He needed a closer look inside the cabin to assess the situation before deciding on his next move. Gripping his weapon, he carefully began to circle the cabin, searching for an angle that would give him a clearer view. As he stepped around the corner, a loose board creaked beneath his boot, shattering the silence. Ben froze, heart pounding as he waited, breath held. Then, without warning, the cabin door burst open. A burly man with a rough appearance stepped out, a pistol gripped tightly in his hand. "Who's there?" he growled, scanning the darkness. "I'm armed. I warn you." Ben's mind raced. He was exposed, completely out of position. If he revealed himself now, he'd be an easy target. But before he could form a plan, a flash of brown fur shot past him. The dog, silent and still up to this point, lunged at the armed man with a fierce snarl. Its teeth sank into the man's arm, causing him to yelp in pain as the gun clattered to the ground. Ben seized the moment. In one swift movement, he closed the distance to the cabin. "Police!" he shouted, his voice cutting through the night. "Drop your weapons and get on the ground." The element of surprise was on his side, and the man at the door, still wrestling with the dog, was unable to reach his fallen weapon. Inside, Ben caught sight of another figure, a wiry man who stood frozen in shock, clearly unprepared for this turn of events. "I said on the ground." Ben's voice carried a tone of unyielding authority. The second man snapped out of his daze, his hand moving instinctively toward his waistband. But Ben was faster. A warning shot rang out, the bullet embedding itself in the cabin wall just inches from the man's head. "Don't even think about it," Ben warned, voice cold and steady. "Hands where I can see them. On your knees now." Both men complied, the larger man having managed to shake off the dog but unwilling to make another move with Ben's gun trained on him. As they lay face down on the ground, Ben moved swiftly, handcuffing them with practiced precision. His years of Marine training kicked in, guiding his actions as he secured both suspects. Finally, Ben allowed himself a moment to take in the scene. In the corner of the dimly lit cabin, bound to a chair, was a woman in her early 30s. Her long, dark hair was disheveled, and her terrified eyes met his as muffled cries escaped through the gag that covered her mouth. "It's okay now," Ben spoke softly, sliding his weapon back into its holster and moving toward the woman bound to the chair. "You're safe. I'm Officer Ben Carson with Willow Creek PD. Let's get you out of here." He carefully removed the gag and began loosening the ropes that restrained her. Tears streamed down her face, relief evident in every sob. "Thank you," she gasped, voice cracking. "Oh God, thank you. I thought no one would find me here. What's your name?" Ben asked gently as he continued untying the ropes. "Jessica," she managed to say through tears. "Jessica Lane. They grabbed me from the grocery store parking lot. I didn't think anyone even noticed I was gone." Ben's jaw tightened as he considered what Jessica had endured, and the thought of what might have happened if he hadn't followed that dog into the forest. Speaking of which, he glanced around, realizing he hadn't seen the dog since its courageous attack on the kidnapper. "Here, boy," he called softly, scanning the dim surroundings. "Where are you, Jex?" A faint whine reached his ears, and the shaggy brown dog emerged from behind the cabin, tail wagging shyly as it looked up at Ben with a mix of pride and uncertainty. "Come here, you hero," Ben said, voice thick with gratitude. The dog's tail wagged faster as it approached, allowing Ben to scratch behind its ears. "You did real good, boy. Real good." The distant wail of sirens grew louder, signaling the arrival of backup. Jessica clung to him, trembling from the ordeal but visibly relieved, while the two kidnappers lay handcuffed on the ground. Ben found himself reflecting on the incredible turn the night had taken, all thanks to one brave, determined dog. The next hours unfolded in a blur of activity. Backup officers secured the scene, took statements, and processed evidence. The kidnappers, as it turned out, were known felons with histories of violent crimes. Jessica was soon reunited with her frantic husband, who had filed a missing persons report earlier that evening. Throughout the commotion, the dog remained by Ben's side, watchful and steadfast, as if aware that its mission wasn't yet complete. As things began to settle, Ben faced a decision. The dog, with no collar and a rough, weathered appearance, was clearly a stray. Standard procedure meant turning it over to animal control, but as Ben looked into those trusting brown eyes, he knew he couldn't simply walk away. As dawn spread over Willow Creek, casting shades of pink and gold across the sky, Officer Ben Carson drove home with a new companion sitting proudly by his side. For the first time in years, he felt a spark of something he thought he'd lost. A sense of hope and excitement for what might lie ahead. Somehow, he sensed that this night's events would ripple out, changing his life and the lives of many others in ways he couldn't yet fathom. His intuition proved true. That night sparked a series of changes that would not only transform Ben's world, but would leave a lasting impact on the entire community. People started stopping him on the street, offering heartfelt thanks for his service. Children stared in awe, clamoring to pet Jex, the hero dog, and declaring their dreams of becoming officers. Ben noticed, too, a shift among his fellow officers. His weariness, once shared by those around him, seemed to lift, replaced by a sense of purpose that began to spread. Younger officers sought his advice more often, drawn by his newfound passion and eager to engage with the community in deeper, more meaningful ways. Over the following weeks, Ben and Jex settled into a rhythm together. The dog was intelligent and eager to learn, mastering basic commands and even picking up a few advanced tricks. Ben found himself growing increasingly curious about Jex's past. The dog's responsiveness suggested prior training, but he wondered how Jex had ended up alone on the streets. Driven by this curiosity, Ben began reaching out to animal shelters and rescue groups, hoping to find some clue to Jex's story. One day, he and Jex visited a bustling local shelter where cages lined nearly every inch of wall space. A woman in her 40s, clearly exhausted yet warm-hearted, approached them. Her face brightened in recognition. "Officer Carson," she greeted him, extending her hand. "I'm Megan Riley, the shelter manager. We've heard so much about you and Jex. What brings you here today?" Ben shook Megan's hand, noting the weariness in her eyes and feeling a pang of sympathy. "I thought we'd stop by, see if you needed a hand," he offered, "and maybe give Jex a chance to socialize if that's okay." "Absolutely," Megan replied, her voice a blend of gratitude and exhaustion. "We do our best, but with limited space and resources, it's tough. We're constantly forced to make hard decisions about which animals we can take in and which." She trailed off, but Ben understood the implication. As they strolled through the shelter, Jex trotted beside them, tail wagging as he approached each kennel. Ben noticed how the nervous barking in the cages softened when Jex drew near. The other dogs seemed to sense his calming presence. To Ben's surprise, a small, timid dog cautiously approached the front of her kennel, sniffing at Jex through the bars. "Well, would you look at that?" Megan said in amazement. That's the first time she's come forward since she arrived. An idea sparked in Ben's mind. "Megan," he began thoughtfully, "what if we started a program where volunteers bring well-socialized dogs to interact with the shelter animals? It could help soothe the anxious ones and give them a bit of mental stimulation." Megan's face lit up. "That's brilliant. We could call it the Canine Comfort Crew. Volunteers could bring in their dogs regularly to interact with the animals. It would be such a help, both to calm them and to identify any behavioral issues we might not have spotted." Ben nodded, excitement building. "And it's about more than the animals. Imagine the community involvement. People who've never been here might get a chance to make a difference." Over the next few weeks, Ben dedicated himself to making the Canine Comfort Crew a reality. He reached out to his contacts at the police department, securing their support for the program. The police chief saw it as an incredible opportunity for positive community engagement, and before long, the Canine Comfort Crew was officially launched. The inaugural gathering of the Canine Comfort Crew took place on a bright, crisp Saturday in early autumn. Ben arrived at the shelter early, with Jex faithfully at his side, ready to help Megan set up. As volunteers and their dogs trickled in, Ben felt a surge of pride. The turnout was incredible, retirees with gentle companions, families with enthusiastic kids and calm family pets, even a few fellow officers who had embraced the community spirit of the program. As the day unfolded, the impact of the program became apparent. One dog, a large, scarred pit bull named Max, had been at the shelter for months. His past in dogfighting had made him wary and hard to place for adoption. But when Jex approached his kennel, Max's posture softened, and he allowed Jex near him without any hint of aggression. "That's remarkable," Megan said, her eyes misting with emotion. "Max has never been this calm around another dog before." Later, as Ben was preparing to leave, a volunteer named Grace approached him. "I lost my husband last year," she said, her voice thick with gratitude. "I thought I'd never find a purpose again, but it feels like what I'm meant to do. Thank you for giving me that gift." Ben swallowed, deeply moved. He thought of his own journey through grief and how Jex had helped him find his way back to life. "No, Grace," he said softly. "Thank you for reminding me why this work is so meaningful." Over time, the community's perspective on animal welfare began to shift. Reports of stray animals and abandonments dwindled as people grew more aware of their responsibilities. The police department saw a decrease in animal-related calls as the community took a more active role in caring for its furry residents. One brisk November morning, Ben received an unexpected call from the chief, asking him to come in early. Worried, he quickly made his way to the station, Jex loyally at his side. When he arrived, the chief was waiting, flanked by Megan and a few city officials. "Ben, we've been observing the success of the Canine Comfort Crew," the chief began, his tone laced with pride. "None of us could have foreseen the positive impact it would have on the community. After some discussion, we've come up with an idea we think you'll find intriguing." Megan continued, "We'd like to create a new role, a full-time liaison between the police department, the shelter, and the community. Someone to manage the Canine Comfort Crew, expand our animal welfare initiatives, and handle animal-related concerns throughout the city. In short, Ben, we'd like you to become Willow Creek's first animal welfare officer." Ben was speechless, emotion swelling in his chest. The chief gave him an encouraging smile. "You're perfect for this role, Ben. You've shown a natural ability to connect with both people and animals. That's exactly what this job requires. The rest you can learn." As Ben took in the weight of the offer, he felt a gentle nudge against his leg. Jex was looking up at him, tail wagging as if to say, "Come on, partner. This is what we're here for." In that moment, Ben's path became clear. Every step, from the night he followed Jex into the woods to this very moment, had been leading him here. This was his chance to honor his late wife's memory, to make a lasting impact on his community. With a sense of renewed purpose, Ben accepted the role wholeheartedly and dove into his work with an energy he hadn't felt in years. He expanded the Canine Comfort Crew, partnering with local schools to develop educational programs on responsible pet ownership. He collaborated with the city council to revise outdated animal control policies, shifting the focus from punishment to rehabilitation and education. He even initiated training programs to equip first responders with animal rescue techniques. But perhaps his proudest accomplishment was establishing the Willow Creek Animal Welfare Center. On the day of its grand opening, the community turned out in droves to show their support. Margaret, a devoted volunteer, attended with her golden retriever, and at her side was Max, the once intimidating pit bull who had transformed into her loyal companion. Megan beamed from the front row, her dedication and hard work finally being celebrated. As Ben began his speech, a lump formed in his throat. "A little over a year ago," he started, voice filled with emotion, "I was a man who had lost his way. I was merely going through the motions, counting down to retirement. Then, on a quiet night, a stray dog crossed my path and led me to a new purpose." He scanned the room, his gaze settling on Jex, who sat proudly beside him. "This center isn't just about animal welfare," he continued. "It's about recognizing the profound connections that can exist between humans and animals. It's about the healing power of those bonds and how they can bring us back to life when we've forgotten how to believe in ourselves." As the ribbon was cut and the doors of the Willow Creek Animal Welfare Center opened for the first time, Ben knew this was only the beginning of a new chapter. For himself, for Jex, and for the entire community. In the years that followed, the center became a model of inspiration for communities across the country. Ben found himself traveling to conferences, sharing the story of how one stray dog had sparked a movement. Children would squeal with excitement whenever they saw him, rushing to meet the hero dog they'd heard so much about. On Jex's estimated 10th birthday, since his exact age was a mystery, Ben organized a celebration at the center. It was a chance to honor not only Jex but all the animals and volunteers who had contributed to the center's mission. As Ben watched Jex greet his admirers, calmly accepting pets and treats with his gentle dignity, he sensed a familiar presence beside him. Turning, he found Jessica, the woman he had rescued that night, standing quietly, a soft smile on her face. "Thank you, Ben," she said, her voice laced with emotion. "You changed my life." As the celebration drew to a close, Ben found himself alone in the quiet center with Jex. The old dog looked up at him, his eyes filled with the same unwavering trust and love that had brought Ben back to life years before. "Well, old friend," Ben said, kneeling down to scratch behind Jex's ears. "What do you say we head home? I think we've earned a peaceful night by the fire." Jex's tail wagged in agreement, and together, man and dog stepped out into the cool night air. As they walked home, Ben couldn't help but marvel at the journey they'd shared and the legacy they had built together. A legacy that would endure for years to come. The story of Officer Ben Carson and his faithful companion, Jex, became legendary in Willow Creek and beyond. It served as a powerful reminder of the transformative power of compassion, the unexpected ways lives can intersect, and the profound impact that a single act of kindness can have on an entire community. In Jex's twilight years, Ben ensured that each day was filled with love, warmth, and all the comforts a loyal friend could deserve. When the time finally came to say goodbye, Ben's heart was full of gratitude, surrounded by loved ones, with Jex's paw resting gently in his hand. A tender reminder of the friend who had forever changed his life and touched the lives of so many others. The legacy of Ben and Jex became a beacon of hope, a testament to the extraordinary bond that can exist between humans and animals. It was a story of redemption, of second chances, and of a community transformed by the simple act of opening their hearts to those in need. And in Willow Creek, it was a story that would be cherished and remembered for generations to come. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe to the channel and like this video. We release a brand new video every day, so stay tuned to this space. We invite you to leave your thoughts and theories in the comments section below. Take care, and see you in the next video.